Now let's go to Germany. Now talks are ongoing for some 20 countries to start a phase out of coal at the UN Climate Change Conference currently ongoing in Bonn, Germany. As you may already know, coal is responsible for more than 40% of global emissions of the greenhouse gas carbon dioxide. Well, when and how are these 20 countries supposed to go through with this, and how did the conversation go at the conference? Let's go live to Germany now, where Sonia Dane, actually head of environment, reports with our partners DW, is standing by. Now, Dane, tell us a bit more about phasing out of coal. How did that suggestion actually emerge?
Well, it was actually spearheaded by the United Kingdom and by Canada, and they put forth this, what's being called the Powering Beyond Coal Alliance. And this alliance then they had an event today where they announced it, and includes 20 different countries from around the world where they've committed to a phase out of coal, which is, as you said, the dirtiest fossil fuel.
We also know about let's speak a bit more about these countries, to be specific, so we know which countries are in, and perhaps why they are leading, this phase out of coal. Tell us a bit about that as well.
Yeah, so there are 20 countries that, there were 19 that were announced, and then one joined during the press conference, so that's kind of exciting. But so Angola is the only African country on the list, Austria, Belgium, we have France, we have Canada, of course, and the UK, as I mentioned, Costa Rica, Denmark, Italy, the Marshall Islands, a country that's very much affected by sea level rise, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Portugal, Switzerland, and El Salvador are among those countries. Fiji, of course, as well on the list. So I think that covers the actual countries that have signed up to this alliance today.
Right, and the special reason is that perhaps it's easier for them to do away with coal, correct?
Yeah, that's something that we noticed as we were looking through this list. We thought, interesting. France, for example, only gets 2% of its power from coal. So somehow it's an easy thing for them to say, we're going to stop using coal and exit out of coal. But for example, Germany, which gets about 45% of its power from coal, is not on this list. And it's because that would be a much bigger challenge for a country that is so dependent on coal as part of its energy mix.
So I can assume that Germany perhaps put up some sort of resistance to this, or I mean, they do understand that we have to phase it out somehow, but that they have a plan. Germany?
No, you're right that Germany does acknowledge that it needs to get out of coal, and in fact that's something that the German Chancellor Angela Merkel stated quite clearly in her speech yesterday at the beginning of the high-level ministerial segment. And she said, we need to get out, and I think it's just a question of when and how. Germany is in a difficult position right now because of the new government that is just trying to be formed. The talks are heated and they're going on late into the night tonight in Berlin, on the other side of Germany, and they'll decide whether the Greens, the FDP, which is the kind of a economically liberal party, and the SPD, so the center-left socialist, center-left social democrats, will be able to come together in a coalition for Germany. Of course, if that happens, it could be good for this coal phase out, because the Greens have that as a very strong part of their platform.
We do know that coal is not the only sort of energy raw material that is dangerous to the environment. We do know about fossil fuel as well, which a lot of people at the conference have been protesting, peak oil as well. Tell us a bit more about other interventions that have come up as ways of dealing with climate change.
Right, so coal is the dirtiest fossil fuel, but it's certainly not the only one. And so oil, gas, and other fossil fuels are still being burned around the world, and some economies are very much dependent on these fossil fuels still. So there's a broader question of when does the world essentially transition out of fossil fuels, and that's sort of the core of what's going on here, and that's the core of the discussion. The Paris Agreement, designed to limit the temperature rise on the Earth to maximum 2 degrees Celsius. We're already at 1 degree, so the window of time is closing in order for the world to, the countries of the world to come together, and that's what they're discussing here. That's what they've been discussing for the past 2 weeks.
At least for the 20 countries that are starting, that's, I mean, a starting point. But whether any understanding or agreement as to how, when do they start? Are there any timelines?
That's actually one of the most contentious points, is the specific measures. And I think that there's a broad consensus, or what I've been hearing along the sidelines of this event is, okay, enough about vague goals. Now we need concrete steps. And what are the concrete steps and the concrete measures that countries will take? And this is, even though it doesn't cite specific numbers of coal plants that will be shut by specific times, it does amount to a strong signal, because basically the countries have pledged, they've committed to phasing out coal. And also the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, last night stated that in his address. There's a clear momentum that seems to be growing, at least in terms of coal. So when we talk about the other fossil fuels, it gets more challenging. And this being able to nail down specific numbers and specific goals is, that's what's being called the rule book. I mean, the rule book is the discussion item that will be completed at this conference, or the draft of which, and then taken to the next conference in Katowice in Poland in 2018.
Hopefully there will be some more concrete steps and some more clear timelines as to how to achieve this. But if I may ask, has the African, leaders that have come to this conference been, how have their contributions been? Because over here in Africa, like yesterday I was saying, it's quite difficult to commit a lot of resources to this, especially when there are lots of social issues that require government attention and government resources. Have they been speaking out about what they themselves will be doing, contributing to climate change when they go back to their countries?
Yeah, absolutely. They have been speaking out. And I just was listening to the minister for Nigeria, as they're going through, every minister is giving their sort of 3-minute summary of what, what the role of their country is. And the minister of Nigeria was saying that one of the things that stuck out in terms of what he was saying was the impacts, that the impacts are being felt, that the coastal erosion, the flooding, the droughts, the extreme weather that's affecting cities, not only cities, but also rural areas, and the breadbasket as well of these of that country. That it's something that's very present, and it's something that is perceived as a true threat, one that's taking place now. And I think one of the main demands of the developing countries has been to be able to get a pledge in terms of financial support to be able to implement these changes, to be able to decarbonize their economies, to adapt as well to the impacts of these extreme weather events and other impacts of climate change.
Sonia, thank you so much. But before I let you go, is there anything else happening in the conference? Of course, any other thing, perhaps interesting things on the site that you can tell us about?
Yeah, well, I think that the probably the most interesting thing for today was certainly this coal announcement. But Certainly interesting is also the role of the United States and with the withdrawal of Trump from the Paris Agreement that he announced last June, that there was a big question mark in terms of, are the countries going to continue to move forward, or will they be demotivated by this political act? And really, it has resulted in an upswelling of solidarity and togetherness of the rest of the world, essentially. An interesting side story that's been happening here is that the U.S. sent a very tiny delegation official delegation to participate in the talks. And however, there was a massive unofficial delegation. They call themselves We Are Still In, and they say, we're still in. We're committed to climate protection. And these are mayors, they're governors of local and regional governments around the United States. So this issue of local climate action has really taken a front seat at this conference as well, I would say.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Sonia. Sonia Dane is the head of the Environment Desk with our partner DW, bringing us up to speed on what's happening at the ongoing UN Climate Change Conference that's happening in Bonn, Germany. Of course, this is Joy News, your most credible source of information. You're still watching The Pulse with me, Gifty and Orpea. Take a quick break. I'll be right back with some more news.